presenting this. I'm really excited to be presenting this topic. It has been very much a part of my life in recent years. And the material I have to share with everyone tonight is information and studies that I've accumulated over quite a few years from our Baha'i sources. Before I begin, I want to mention one little interesting detail. As fate would have it, tomorrow, September the 8th, actually is my 50th Baha'i birthday. I'm going to be 50 years old in the Baha'i Faith tomorrow. So this is a happy occasion for me to be able to share that with all of you. And so with that, I will start to share my screen. And I have a PowerPoint presentation, by the way. Before I do that, I have a PowerPoint presentation that I have made for you. There are many, many slides in it, and I don't expect you to try to take notes or try to capture every word. For anyone who wants the slides later, I can make that available to you. My email information will be in the slide at the beginning and at the slide at the end. So any of you, if you wish to contact me for the PowerPoint files or file, or for any commentary or questions or disagreements or discussions, any of that, that would be just fine. So, all right. We're going to go through many of these slides pretty quickly, but you're going to get the overall message of what the divine curriculum is all about. So let me share my screen and see how it goes. Okay, can everybody see my screen now? I can't see you at the moment, so you have to speak up if you want me to know that you're there.
We're here. If you want to expand this, it would be even better.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Perfect.
Okay, that should do it.
Great.
Everybody can see it?
Yes.
Okay. So what is the never-ending divine curriculum, and what role do the Bab and Baha'u'llah play in it? So there we go. Here's my contact information. I'll show it to all of you again at the end of the presentation. As was mentioned just a moment ago, I am an author in the book series Divine Curriculum. And here are the books that are published so far. There are more books on other manifestations of God, like Abraham and Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, and Baha'u'llah, which are also in the works. And so I was also the co-writer producer of the film The Gate. And that gate can be seen with this YouTube link. It is available free of charge for anybody who wants to look into it. Okay, so why do I write about the divine curriculum? A time came in my life when I began to think that our generation of Baha'is could do a better job teaching the faith. I reflected on this question, and some of the quotes from Abdu'l-Baha and Baha'u'llah came to my attention. Here's one of those quotes. Abdu'l-Baha was writing to a woman who was about to go pioneering, and these are the instructions he gave her. when delivering the glad tidings, speak out and say. So he's literally putting these words into her mouth, telling her what to say. Speak out and say, the promised one of all the world's peoples hath now been made manifest. For each and every people and every religion await a promised one, and Baha'u'llah is that one who is awaited by all. And therefore, the cause of Baha'u'llah will bring about the oneness of mankind. And the tabernacle of unity will be upraised on the heights of the world, and the banners of the universality of all humankind will be unfurled on the peaks of the earth. When thou dost loose thy tongue to deliver this great good news, this will become the means of teaching the people. So when you see this, you notice immediately how bold and forthright and candid he is about the station of Baha'u'llah and the claims that he makes, and that this Baha'u'llah's cause will bring about the oneness of mankind. So this led me to think that our approach to teaching the faith, teaching the Baha'i Faith, should focus on the person of Baha'u'llah and on the mission of Baha'u'llah. So I started research on this topic, and then I faced a sudden realization when I saw this. I came across this quote from Abdu'l-Baha, which showed me it wasn't actually possible to just focus only on the mission of Baha'u'llah. He wrote, "It is evident, therefore, that the holy manifestations who founded the religious systems are united and agreed. There is no differentiation possible in their mission and teachings. All are reflectors of reality, and all are promulgators of the religion of God." So if you're going to write about the mission of Baha'u'llah, this guidance seems to clearly say that you can't really distinguish the mission of Baha'u'llah from the mission of the other messengers of God either. You have to treat them in a holistic fashion. It has to be all-inclusive. So this is why I realized that I had to discuss all of the manifestations of God in my study of the divine curriculum, not just Baha'u'llah. Moreover, this requires not showing any favoritism or partiality, because this is what Baha'u'llah wrote. He says, "Thou hast inquired which of the prophets of God should be regarded as superior to others. Know assuredly that the essence of all the prophets of God is one and the same. Their unity is absolute. To prefer one and honor to another, to exalt certain ones above the rest, is in no wise permitted. Every true prophet hath regarded his message as fundamentally the same as the revelation of every other prophet gone before him." So as you clearly can see, Baha'u'llah is using very strong language here to say that you can't put one above the other. At the same time, I recognize that all of the prior divine educators were preparing humanity for the coming of Baha'u'llah. They were all striving for this day, the day of divine civilization being established. Baha'u'llah wrote this: "The purpose underlying all creation is the revelation of this most sublime, this most holy day, the day known as the day of God and his books and scriptures, the day which all the prophets and the chosen ones and the holy ones have wished to witness." So putting this together, the divine curriculum approach is absolutely, explicitly, it's inspired by the teachings of the Baha'i Faith. And as is discussed in my books on the topic, it's also inspired by the scriptures of the major world religions. But the logical structure of the divine curriculum is based on Baha'u'llah's Book of Certitude. Here's what Shuk Effendi says about the Book of Certitude in God Passes By. And this is really quite a remarkable statement. Well may it be claimed that of all the books revealed by the author of the Baha'i Revelation, this book alone, by sweeping away the age-long barriers that have so insurmountably separated the great religions of the world, has laid down a broad and unassailable foundation for the complete and permanent reconciliation of their followers. This book alone. So as you can imagine, what Baha'u'llah provided us in the Book of Certitude has been my touchstone all the way along while I've been working on the Divine Curriculum series. So this is one of our most crucial sources. And he says this book alone will bring about the reconciliation of the diverse religions of the world. Okay, so let's talk about the concept. What is the divine curriculum? Let's talk about that. Okay, so in these 6 words, the premise of the divine curriculum is stated. All of creation is a classroom. That is the overarching theme of the entire series. All of creation is a classroom. So the elements of the divine curriculum are very straightforward. God is the owner and director of the school. All of creation is the school, the classroom. The human beings are the students, the divine educators are the teachers, the scriptures are the textbooks, and the teachings are the curriculum. The analogy lines up perfectly. Abdul Baha comments that without education, without the manifestations of God, without them coming to us as divine educators, he says all mankind would be found on the plane of the animal. They would remain darkened and ignorant, like those who have been denied schooling and who have never had a teacher or a trainer. So we need an educator. He goes on elsewhere. He says, all humankind are as children in a school. And the dawning points of light, the sources of divine revelation, are the teachers, wondrous and without peer. He says, what is the mission of the prophet? And then he says it's the purpose of the divine law is the education of the human race, training of humanity. All mankind may be considered as pupils or children who are in need of a divine educator, a real teacher. And then he says, read in the school of God the lessons of the Spirit. Seek out the secrets of heaven. Then he says the holy manifestations of God are the first teachers of the human race. They are the universal educators. And again, they are the first educators and trainers of humanity. So the divine curriculum approach agrees with the monotheistic religions, which are Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and of course, Baha'i itself, that there is but one God for all of humanity and creation. All humanity are children of one God, they're one human race. Baha'i Faith strongly emphasizes the oneness of God and also the infinity of God. So the various scriptures present God as transcendent. This steers humanity away from anthropomorphism, which can be considered as casting God in man's image. And this approach to the concept of God sets aside man-made constructs and ideas, and also suggests, given the infinity of God, that actually none of us truly understands God in his fullness. So fighting about man-made constructs is pointless. So the Bab taught the perspective of unity, which relies upon this pure, mature monotheism. And then he explains in his writings the following. Therefore, it is necessary, according to true wisdom, that the pre-existent God describe himself to his creatures, that they may recognize their creator, and that out of the grace of the pre-existent, the contingent beings may attain their supreme end. Another aspect of the perspective as unity is that in all things one finds the signs of God's revelation. He wrote, within the inmost reality of all things, there hath been and will forever continue to be a sign from God through which the unity of the Lord is celebrated. This sign, however, is a reflection of his will present within it, through which naught is seen but God. So this is the perspective of unity taught by the Bab. Professor Nader Saidi, author of Gate of the Heart, describes the perspective of unity as seeing in all things only the signs and traces of the divine effulgence that permeate and constitute all of creation. So this transforms all of reality, everything we see, into mirrors, reflecting in every form God's divine names in all their glory. So regardless of whether you are of one race or another, your sex, your nationality, your social status, or your outward appearance, we are all spiritually reflections of the Creator. And then the fullness of God's unity is demonstrated on the earthly plane by the near infinite diversity of the human race. So this provides the spiritual rationale, and it's the logical outcome of this logic, of this teaching, is the oneness of humanity and an embrace of the principle of unity through diversity. So in their infinitely diverse forms, all things are reflections of the same light of God because there's only one God. So naturally, all of the light of the primal will of God originates from the same source. So all things are united as recipients of his light. So humanity is one because we are all mirrors reflecting the same light of God. The Bab wrote, become as true brethren in the one and indivisible religion of God, free from distinction. For verily God desireth that your hearts should become mirrors unto your brethren in the faith, so that ye find yourselves reflected in them and they in you. This is the true path of God. So this is a very powerful way for us to understand the nature of physical and spiritual reality. So in the divine curriculum approach, who are the teachers? And so here's a partial list. Not all of the manifestations of God are known to us. Many of them are, and this is a partial list of them. So according to the divine approach, the founders of the major religions were sent from the same God. They are like sequential grades of one underlying revelation through the ages. Men, not God, have caused the divisions and distortions of religion. So according to the divine curriculum approach, we should view the divine educators as cooperating members of one school faculty. So imagine the divine educators in the Epoch Kingdom going into, a meeting space, and we can consider that to be like the teacher's lounge, and they're all talking to each other about the curriculum that they're delivering to humanity to educate humanity. And they're talking about, what lessons will be at what revelation and so forth. It's kind of a fun thought to think of them all meeting in the teacher's lounge. Anyway, So the divine curriculum approach views the divine educators in their lived historical context, views them on the timeline of history. By the way, please note, God put them on the timeline. We didn't do it. We're just acknowledging what God already did. So by putting someone further away in time and someone more recently, that's just simply an artifact of history. It's not any putting anyone up or putting anyone down. So the divine educators appear in history approximately every 500 to 1,000 years. There have been many of them, and here are some that are known to history, putting them on a timeline of history. And of course, there are other divine messengers that have occurred as well, but this illustrates the point that they have appeared approximately every 500 to 1,000 years. But indeed, with the appearance of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, something new has happened that has never happened before. We have actually had two divine messengers, divine educators, appear contemporaneously with one another. So I'm going to go through this very quickly, but you can see this table shows names of the messengers, their approximate dates, the religions associated with them, the scripture that is associated with them, the part of the world where they originated, and the part of the world where their influence was mostly felt. And so here's a way we can understand the divine educators, the manifestations of God. And as you watch me talk through this, you'll recognize this is based on Abdu'l-Baha's explanation of the Trinity, where God the Father is symbolized as the sun and the center of our solar system, the rays of light which permeate all of space is like the primal will, or another term for that is the Holy Spirit, emanating throughout all of creation. The manifestations of God are like perfect mirrors, reflecting the light of the image of God, and they are reflecting the Holy Spirit into the human realm, and we humans get to receive the bounty of their revelation. One way that this, so you see the Father, you see the Spirit, and you see the Son, which is the mirror. One of the ways that this differs from, say, traditional Christian thinking is, as Baha'is, we would not say that the Trinity has only occurred once in history. It has occurred many times in history. And notice that this interpretation, which is derived from Abdu'l-Baha's explanation in some answered questions, that this interpretation maintains the unity and the oneness of God without compromise. There's no three persons in one here, just the three interlocking, interconnected working parts for the divine revelation process. So the Bab mentioned the primal will in connection to the manifestations. He said in the time of the first manifestation, the primal will appeared in Adam in the day of Noah. It became known in Noah, in the day of Abraham and him. And so in the day of Moses, the day of Jesus, the day of Muhammad, the day of the point of Bayan, which is the Bab, the day of him whom God shall make manifest, who is Baha'u'llah, and the day of the one who will appear after him. What shineth resplendent in each one of them hath been and will ever remain one and the same sun. So here's a clear, explicit mentioning that the primal will appears in the manifestations of God. Okay. The Bab also stated there's no paradise more wondrous for any soul than to be exposed to God's manifestation in his day, and that true knowledge, the knowledge of God, is none other than the recognition of his manifestation in each dispensation. Baha'u'llah in the Book of Certitude gives us an important point of logic here, where he explains that the divine educators, the manifestations of God, have a dual station, which he labels as unity and distinction. as far as the station of unity, he says, every one of them is a mirror of God, reflecting not else but his self, his beauty, his might, and glory, if ye will understand. And then he says, no distinction do we make between any of his messengers. And here's a wonderful cartoon from Charlie Brown. Lucy is looking up at the sky and talking to Charlie. He says, I've been counting the suns, Charlie Brown. Every day I count a new one. I've got 12 so far. It's very interesting work. They all look different. So Charlie says to her, what would you say if I told you there was only one sun? Lucy says, you'd be crazy. And Charlie walks away and Lucy looks back up in the sky. Anyway, the station of distinction is each manifestation of God has a distinct individuality, a definitely prescribed mission, a predestined revelation, is characterized by a special attribute, fulfills a definite mission, and is entrusted with a particular revelation. So Abdu'l-Baha elaborates this a little bit. He says the divine curriculum, he says, in every dispensation, the light of divine guidance hath been focused upon one central theme. Over time, an entire curriculum is taught. So if you look at this stack of books, in Abraham's time, the central theme of revelation in that period was the oneness of God. In Moses's time, the emphasis was on the law of God. In Jesus' time, the emphasis was on the love of God. Then later with Muhammad, the principle of Islam, the word Islam means submission to God. And we were talking just now about the perspective of unity of the Bab and how everything is a reflection of the signs of God. And then with Baha'u'llah, we have the oneness of humanity. So each revelation in its time has focused on a central theme. That doesn't mean other principles weren't mentioned. Of course they were, but this is where the emphasis has gone through the ages. So each of the revelations, each of the divine educators has brought a book, which we consider to be the textbooks of the divine curriculum. And here are some of the names of some of the textbooks that are known to us. And here are some of the teachings. Krishna emphasized fulfilling one's duty. As I mentioned, Abraham emphasized the oneness of God and the sacredness of human life. Moses, the law of God. Zoroaster emphasized good and evil and the importance of free will. Buddha talked about release from suffering. Jesus taught about the kingdom of God and God's love. Muhammad taught about submission to God's will. The Bab emphasized all things are a reflection of God, and he also emphasized the coming of the next manifestation, who was Baha'u'llah. And then Baha'u'llah emphasized the oneness of humanity. And then, of course, in the future, we don't know what they'll teach, but in the future divine educators will come and they will continue the divine curriculum, which is never ending. So here's a screen that kind of goes into a little more detail about the different things that each individual revelator, divine educator brought. You can see there's quite a bit of substance here in each and every one of these things, and has been sufficient to keep humanity busy for literally for centuries. So, and here's also, let's not forget the other divine educators not in the Abrahamic lineage. You can see also, again, quite a bit of important information and teaching has been given to humanity through the ages. So all of this through the centuries, one revelation coming after another, has had a cumulative effect. And Abdu'l-Baha says that the mission of the prophets has been to train the souls of humanity and free them from the thraldom of natural instincts and physical tendencies. He also talks about edifying and elevating the soul above selfishness. He talks about conquering evil, which he describes as the insistent self is the real source of evil in the world. And the aim overall is to make human nature heavenly. So when you look back on all of this, approximately 4,000 to 6,000 years of human history, I would ask you, doesn't this look like a fairly comprehensive curriculum to you? And if you actually learned to do all of these things, benefiting from each and every one of the divine educators who brought such valuable teachings to humanity, wouldn't your material nature be more under the control of your spiritual nature? So from age to age, the continuity of the divine curriculum has advanced humanity's spiritual education. And over time, an entire curriculum has been taught. In each age, the light of divine guidance has been focused on one central theme. So there's a lot of similarities in each of these pieces. You can think of it also like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, all this divine curriculum coming together. Certain pieces are similar, certain pieces are different. Each piece reveals a part of the whole picture. Every piece that is given sets the stage for the ones that are going to follow it later on. And every piece that is provided builds on what was revealed previously. This means that every piece of the puzzle is essential to the whole. And this is the work of the divine educators, gradually revealing the divine curriculum through the millennia, through the centuries. Now, it's important to note that this approach is entirely even-handed in its treatment of every divine educator. So if you were someone that comes from a Christian background or a Buddhist background or a Muslim background, it doesn't matter. Whatever background you come from, your loyalties are maintained, but they're also expanded when you are enabled to embrace the manifestations of God that you didn't previously embrace. Each founder's contribution is acknowledged in this process of the never-ending divine curriculum. Each divine educator has had unique traits, and these traits are appreciated in their historical context, particularly when we base our study on trustworthy sources. The founders of each of these different stages of the divine curriculum are praised by one another, and they are never belittled. And then the knowledge is shared and passed on from one dispensation to the next, from one generation to the next as well. So an important feature of the divine curriculum is that in the words of Shoghi Effendi, it distinguishes between the God-given truths, which are given by the founders, and the priest-prompted superstitions that were added on later. And those quotes, those are Shoghi Effendi's terminology. And I'll just make the quick observation that when I am engaged in a conversation with some person, could be anyone, coming from a different religious background than where I am at, and controversies get started in the conversation, very often it is because one of the man-made alterations has become dogma to that person, and they treat the man-made contributions, so like the work of the theologians, for example, they treat it as if that were the revealed truth. And so unconflating what came from God and what came from man becomes a crucial skill that you have to employ in your dialogue with other people. So the divine curriculum approach is often at odds with the doctrines of the theologians and the clerics, but it strives very, very much to be faithful to the sacred writings and teachings of the founders themselves. This distinction between the divine side of the religion and the human side of the religion, which is terminology that I have adopted, is actually a major methodological assumption about how the divine curriculum approach works. And this distinction is the only way possible for discerning the unity among the religions, even as there coexist great amounts of disunity and disagreement. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you're in a classroom. Remember, all of creation is a classroom, so this will work for us. You're in a classroom with maybe 20 or 30 other students, and the teacher is giving a lecture. All of the students are feverishly taking down their notes as the professor is talking. So at the end of the session, if we collected up all of the students' notes and compared them with one another, would you find them to be more alike, or would you find them to be diverging from one another? I would suggest that different students take notes in different ways, and so there'd be a lot of contradictory understandings among the students' notes. Their notes will be messy. On the other hand, the teachers are not confused about their own teachings, their curriculum. Their notes will be clear and coherent and accurate. And because there's only the one teacher and not the many students, there's only one version of the teacher's notes. So the teacher's notes will be unified, clear, coherent, and correct. So if you're relying on the textbooks rather than the student's notes, if you're relying on the material that comes from the teacher rather than the people who are taking down the notes, this is the only way that you can find unity and continuity among them. This is why I try to rely so much as I can, on the divine side of religion and lesser so on the human side. In the meantime, I treat all of the divine educators with equal adoration. I cite from all the scriptures, and I strive to let them speak with one voice. Now, if you're going through a school system, this is normally what you would like to see. I'm not putting any names here. The grade levels, the numbers are arbitrary, but you go first, second, third, fourth. At the end of each grade, what do you want to occur? Do you want to stay in that grade, or do you want to accept the promotion that your teacher is giving you so that you can go on to the next grade? So in an actual school, the behavior that's expected of the students is to advance step by step through each grade. Each time they're deemed eligible at the end of the school year to accept their advancement and move on. Now, if you're like in the 8th grade, are you rejecting everything you learned when you were like in the 4th grade? Of course not. You take all that with you. And so everything that you were taught before continues to assist you, but you get to advance and keep learning more and more. This is the optimum path of how we're all supposed to go through school. One school, many teachers. So the Bab said this: the Lord of the universe hath never raised up a prophet, nor hath he sent down a book, unless he hath established his covenant with all men, calling for their acceptance of the next revelation and of the next book, inasmuch as the outpourings of his bounty are ceaseless and without limit. So if you're in the school of God, this is what the optimum path should look like, don't you think? You move forward from age to age. All creation is a classroom. We are all students in the school of God, and what each person should do is stay current with the divine curriculum as it advances in time. So this one school, many teachers, basically it's one curriculum evolving, never ending, and it's universal. All of the students are supposed to advance through each dispensation or each grade of the school of God. Well, this is what's happened instead. The historical path of going through the school of God is that we've moved forward from age to age, but large populations are not staying current with the divine curriculum. So if at each stage you reject the next manifestation, then you would remain as you were. You would not advance in the divine curriculum. So this is actually the mechanism by which so many religions were created. God's religion is one, and had we all universally accepted our promotions, the followers of one religion would be subsumed and embraced into the followers of the next religion, revelation, I mean, and then the next revelation and the next revelation. We would all just be human beings in the school of God. But we didn't do that in human history. Instead, some advanced and some stayed behind. And the ones that didn't accept the next messenger of God remained as they were. And as you know, their descendants remained in those camps. So now we have, in the universal school of God, now we have many subdivisions and disunity in the school of God. And the religions then go into conflict with one another, like crusades and jihadi terrorists and all that horrible stuff that has happened throughout history. That's the historical pattern that we have followed. But the intention of the Bab and Baha'u'llah is what you might call to correct this and bring about the unity of the human race such that all of this separation will come to an end. So Abdul Baha, in his book, The Secret of Divine Civilization, spoke about modernity. And he said it was right to reject, blatant materialism, atheism, corruption. Oh, pardon me, a typo. I have atheism written there twice. Sorry about that. But it's wrong. He said it was right to reject those things, but it was wrong to reject reason, science, technology. He said it was wrong to embrace dogma and fanaticism. And he said it was wrong to reject uplifting social norms, such as women's equality, rule of law, representative government, freedom of religion, human rights, and so forth. True modernity, he asserted, requires true religion, freedom from dogmatism, true science, and uplifting social norms. True modernity requires embracing all of the divine educators, including the Bab and Baha'u'llah. So true modernity aims towards unity, not disunity. Nevertheless, in our modern age, disunity is pervasive, and it is the cause of humanity's ills. So we have things like racism, fanaticism, extreme nationalism, wars and militarism, godlessness, tyranny. We also have kind of on the individual level traits like selfishness, corruption, egotism, materialism. So all of these characteristics are expressions of disunity, and they function at individual level, nations, within yourself, and between man and God. These are all different variations of disunity. So these are indications of a spiritual poverty and moral deprivation in our age. And these actually call for a higher moral purpose for mankind, the unity of humanity. These call for a virtuous response, a spiritual and moral awakening of the human race. What Baha'u'llah calls quickening and uniting the human race, regeneration. And this would be so regardless of any sectarian differences. So here's an interesting quote from 1974 from the Universal House of Justice about the disunity and the suffering in the world. We must not allow ourselves to forget the continuing appalling burden of suffering under which millions of human beings are always groaning. The principal cause of this suffering, which one can witness wherever one turns, is the corruption of human morals and the prevalence of prejudice, suspicion, hatred, untrustworthiness, selfishness, and tyranny among men. Now, it's very, very interesting. In another letter from the Universal House of Justice, the following diagnosis of humanity's condition is given. They say the first step essential for the peace and progress of mankind is its unification. As he says, the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. To this day, however, you will find most people take the opposite point of view. They look upon unity as an ultimate, almost unattainable goal and concentrate first on remedying all of the other ills of mankind. If they did but know it, these other ills are but various symptoms and side effects of the basic disease, which is disunity. So we end up playing whack-a-mole with all the various ills and things that are outrages and offenses against humanity. But the deeper situation is that these many problems that we face in the world today are expressions of disunity. And the underlying disease causing all of these problems is disunity. So we'll talk about the purpose of the divine curriculum for a moment. Baha'u'llah says, having created the world and all that liveth and moveth therein, he, through the direct operation of his unconstrained and sovereign will, chose to confer upon man the unique distinction and capacity to know him and to love him. Capacity that must needs be regarded as a generating impulse and the primary purpose underlying the whole of creation. This is very, very important, because when we think about the work of all of the divine educators, everything that was taught to us all along, the purpose of the entire divine curriculum from beginning to end is to enable us to know God and to love God. And I make the point in my book that you have to have free will to know God and to love God. So I added the third component on my own, to choose God. So I would say to know God, to love God, and to choose God is the goal and aim of the divine curriculum. So the mission of the prophets has been to train the souls of humanity and to free them from the thraldom of natural instincts and physical tendencies. So we know, love, and choose God. We elevate the soul above self. We conquer the insistent self, the source of evil, make human nature heavenly, and we establish God's civilization on earth. That's where all of this is going. We need to say a few things about the insistent self. This is important. The concept of Satan or the devil as an actual being opposed to God is rejected by the Baha'i teachings, but the term is understood by Baha'is to mean the promptings of self and desire and the dark side of human nature. It says, look, in the quote that follows, the cause of God is spirit unalloyed. Its only army is the love of God. Its only joy is the clear wine of his knowledge. Its only battle, the expounding of the truth. Its one crusade is against the insistent self, the evil promptings of the human heart. Its victory is to submit and yield, to be selfless, and is its everlasting glory. It is spirit upon spirit. So overcoming the insistent self is the same thing as the conquest of evil in man. And so Further commentary from the House of Justice: every human being is a spiritual nature and a material nature. Our purpose is to subdue the material nature, which inclines us towards evil. And so these are used in the sacred books as symbols of the promptings of the lower nature of man. And so Abdu'l-Baha has this very, very interesting thing to say about material civilization and divine civilization. He says that we need both. Material civilization is like the body. No matter how infinitely graceful, elegant, and beautiful it may be, it is dead. He means spiritually dead. Divine civilization is like the spirit, and the body gets its life from the spirit. Without the spirit, the world of mankind is lifeless. He says, for the world of nature is an animal world. Until man is born again from the world of nature, that is to say, become detached from the world of nature, he is essentially an animal. And it is the teachings of God which convert this animal into a human soul. So we're talking about a fundamental process of transformation here, converting an animal into the human soul. This is where the divine curriculum is taking us. So now we have an overview of what the divine curriculum is all about, and we're going to explore more in a more focused way the roles of the Bab and Baha'u'llah in that divine curriculum. So all of the messengers of God known to us have occurred in approximately the last 6,000 years. And this is known in the Baha'i writings as the Adamic cycle or the prophetic cycle. And this is just a graphic representation of that. And by the way, I didn't attempt in the graphic to draw every manifestation. It would make the graphic too cluttered, but this makes the point come across. So for 6,000 years until 1844, humanity was in the prophetic cycle. This can be compared to like the childhood of humanity, a period of preparation and maturation. Now we come to the dispensations of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, and we are told it will be not less than 1,000 years. So if you put that on a timeline, we're 180 years into this 1,000-year period. That's 18%. I've done the math, it's just for fun. It's 18%, or a little more than 2 inches on a 12-inch ruler, of the dispensations of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. This means that we have about 820 years or more to go. So at a minimum, we have 82% of the dispensation still ahead of us. And you can see I've marked where we are in history. So the goal of the revelations of the Bab and Baha'u'llah is the fulfillment of the divine curriculum thus far. So everything that we have learned in the divine curriculum is preparation for this, the day of God, the day known as the day of God. And what is to occur in this 1,000-year period is to achieve the oneness of humanity, the most great peace, and the birth of divine civilization. And simultaneous with that, or integral with that most great peace collectively, is the universal conversion of the animal man into the angelic human soul. Ultimately, we're talking about, in this 1,000-year period, we're talking about the conquest of evil, which is ultimately the only war that we're actually involved in. The universal peace will be established at some point during these 1,000 years. And this represents humanity's coming of age, the ending of humanity's childhood, and the beginning of humanity's adulthood. And so this establishment of the most great peace will be done, as Jesus told us, on earth as it is in heaven. So the adulthood of humanity is what has just begun. So in this graphic, you see in the left-hand side, the Adamic cycle for scale has been dramatically reduced. And that's because as many years as there are to go in the dispensation of Baha'u'llah, the cycle of fulfillment is actually, according to the writings of the Baha'i Faith, destined to endure for 500,000 years. So there will be, during the course of that dispensation, that cycle, many, many, many manifestations of God come in the future. So the most great peace is actually established at the very earliest dispensation, the dispensation of Baha'u'llah, in this fulfillment cycle. And only God knows what great, wonderful, fantastic, and unimaginably blessed achievements for humanity are to come in the dispensations beyond the dispensation of Baha'u'llah. I actually would make the argument that our full human destiny is only realizable after the most great peace is established. I believe in future ages and future epochs, it will come to be understood that the establishment of the oneness of humanity is the necessary precursor to what ultimately will be the greatness of the human race and the great blessings that God has in store for us. So this is a way to look at the cycle of fulfillment in relationship to the Adamic cycle. Again, on a 12-inch ruler, the 6,000-year period is maybe about a 16th of an inch of the total 12-inch ruler. It's less than a quarter of an inch. And that is the entire 6,000-year period of human history. And the blue area, basically the remaining 11 3/4 or more inches is what is in humanity's future. It's just remarkable when you think about the scale of time that is envisioned here. Now, here's something really interesting from Shoghi Effendi when he talks about what is the outcome of achieving the unity of the human race. And it's very important that you notice that the passage begins with the phrase, then will. So he in this passage out of Promised Day Has Come, is talking about humanity achieving the most great peace. And then he says, then, so it's after the most great peace, then will the planet galvanize through the universal belief of its dwellers in one God and their allegiance to one common revelation, mirror within the limitations imposed upon it the effulgent glories of the sovereignty of Baha'u'llah, shining in the plenitude of its splendor in the Abha paradise, and be made the footstool of his throne on high, and acclaimed as the earthly heaven, capable of fulfilling that ineffable destiny fixed for it from time immemorial by the love and wisdom of its creator. So as I read this passage, it is only after we achieve the oneness of humanity and the divine civilization of the most great peace, only after we have achieved it, in the ages to come, are we deemed capable of fulfilling the destiny that God has in store for humanity. Of course, at our present stage of development in the year 2023, none of us is capable of imagining what that destiny might involve. It is only something that we can speculate about. And to my knowledge, Baha'u'llah hasn't told us anything about what that future destiny entails. The only thing that we know about it is that it is infinitely glorious. And the word ineffable means you can't put it in words. It's inexpressible in how wonderful and blessed it will be. So ultimately, long-term, the Baha'is have, from the revelation of the faith, an extremely optimistic view of humanity. No matter what the troubles are today, humanity will survive it, will learn its lessons, overcome its disunity, and achieve the wonders of humanity, and then go on to unimaginable greatness in the epochs to come. So, summing all this up, 6,000 years of human history has been preparation. All of that has been to get us ready. The dispensation of Muhammad was the last one of the Adamic cycle. The dispensation of the Bab terminated the Islamic dispensation, and it terminated the Adamic cycle. It was, in my view, I would call it the end of the beginning of human history. It saw the first moments of the age of fulfillment. The dispensation of Baha'u'llah, and these are my words, marks the 1,000-year beginning of the middle of human history, that long stretch of time, the age of fulfillment, during which what it means to be human finally and fully emerges. Humanity will at last be ready to attain that unimaginable destiny our loving God has in store for us. And that is the conclusion of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it very much, understanding how the divine curriculum is put together, how it operates, what its functions are, and then the roles of the Bab and Baha'u'llah in that divine curriculum. I'm going to now stop sharing my screen, and if anybody wishes to ask some questions, we can do that. Of the faith, the rules of the faith were that once you're 13 and you've had your bar mitzvah, you can decide for yourself whether or not to continue in your Hebrew school studies. Before that, it was compulsory. So the first moment I got when my parents told me I could decide, I said, no, I'm done. I don't want to have anything more to do with it. I'm finished. And they let me be. There was no big fight over it. They just said, okay, fine, that's your answer. And the way my 13-year-old mind worked at the time was I was not schooled in any of the other religions. I didn't know anything at all. I was really just a 13-year-old boy. And so to me, if I was rejecting Judaism, I was rejecting all religion, even though I knew somewhere out there were other religions. It didn't even get on my radar screen. So I became an atheist. To me, that was the honorable position of, well, if you don't believe in Judaism, then you don't believe in God, in which I didn't believe in God. So you're an atheist. And that was that. And I went through high school as an atheist, and I arrived at college at the University of Virginia as an atheist. Now, I got to tell you, I was not the nice atheist. I was not the friendly atheist. I was the belligerent, argumentative, pushy, and unfriendly atheist. I used to make fun of people who had religion, and I can't say that I'm proud of that, but that's who I was at that stage of my life. And so when I was at University of Virginia, I met a woman, her name is Mary Gregory, who is a pioneer to Finland and still there, beautiful, wonderful person. And Mary and I became friends. And actually we studied together because we had exams that we needed to, prepare for in the morning. So we did all-nighters, we studied, and eventually after a few months of being friendly with Mary, she let it drop into the conversation that she was a Baha'i. And my first instinct was to do what I always did, which was to go on the attack. And so I attempted to destroy her religion. And to make a long story short, I was a little bit like the fly caught in the spider's web, because the more I struggled, the more interesting it became. And Mary's response to me was not to fight. I couldn't get her to fight. I was trying to make a fight, but I couldn't get her to fight. She would listen to me. She had phenomenal listening skills. And after I would talk for a while about the horribleness of religion, she would just pause, and then she would ask me a question. Have you thought about such and such? And she had this like laser guided question system that she could pinpoint the part of my thinking that needed to be examined. And so she would ask me the question and I would say, no, I hadn't thought of that. And I was actually a basically honest person, even if I was unfriendly to religious people. I was a basically honest individual, so I would actually go and think about it. And that was fine. She didn't really need to conquer me or anything. She just made her point and we went back to being study partners. Anyway, this process continued and my mind gradually opened through this process of dialogue. And I felt with Mary that I was never engaged in any kind of strife or conflict. We certainly didn't agree, but it was always with such radiant love. I had never encountered anything like that in my life. She stood her ground and she was very clear about what she believed. And yet it never became a source of conflict between us. And then she would let me be. And my process continued that way for a few months. But what ultimately won me to the faith, and I'll stop here, is it was the magic of Baha'u'llah himself. I learned about who he was and the power of his teachings. I encountered his words through Mary. And I asked myself in the end, if this man is not from God, then no one can ever make such a claim. And I can't go into all the details now, but it was through Baha'u'llah, ultimately, that I came to realize that there was a God and that he was the messenger of God, and I needed to be a Baha'i. And that's what I did 50 years ago tomorrow night. So that's actually the short version of the story.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the main point that I got from it, of course, is Baha'u'llah is the main thing, but she listened to you. She listened. That's the main key point.
That's very important.
I think it is very important. Listening before we get excited and jumping to say our things. Yeah.
Her listening skills were phenomenal. One other thing that I liked about her very much, very quickly I'll add, is that in replacement for getting rid of Judaism out of my mentality, I became very enamored with science. I was very good at science as a young person. And so I was fascinated by the idea of the harmony of science and religion, and that religion could be reasonable. That was shocking to me at that time. And that was very impactful as well. Yeah. But you're quite right to mention that the listening skills made all the difference. God bless her. I love her dearly. Yeah.
Edward, since I haven't asked any questions in
Okay.
the past 2.5 hours,
I'm
let-
sorry it's taken so long.
it's okay. I will ask the last question. Oh, Dr.
Yes,
I had
Fabian,
a
do you want to
question.
ask a question? Please, I apologize.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Ed, thank you very much for your very comprehensive talk and beautiful illustrations. It helps definitely to see the point.
Thank you.
I go back to the Bible again, and well, that 6,000 years in the beginning of your illustrations about the Adamic cycle. Now, of course, we know that many more years before that, humanity existed on Earth, and goes back maybe, I don't know, a couple of million years ago. Now, that the diagram that you have, now if we extend back, of course, you know, we see also the future will be extended beyond the 500,000 years.
Yes.
Now, as we know in the writings also states about that humanity has never been left alone by God, and always
Correct.
teachers to guide him. Now,
Yes.
my question was that, yeah, with respect to your diagram there, if you bring evolution in and the science, or not even that, he's just, you know, from looking at the fossils, kinds of things, and history of mankind is beyond definitely 6,000 years. And the
I had a
question
little
was, if you
trouble
could add
hearing
this
you.
to- Yes, if you could add and extend your, or could you hear me now well?
I heard you, I had a little trouble, but I think you're asking me about messengers of God before the 6,000 years.
And also
the
about
Adamic
your diagram, which you starts and it's very short in the beginning, that's 6,000 years, you know, compared to 500,000 years, of course, is in your ruler, it's a very low. But my understanding is that may have to be extended a little bit in the past.
Absolutely. Abdul Baha and is clear that there were many cycles before the Adamic cycle, and that the Bab himself says that the messengers of God are innumerable. So when I put up a list of manifestations of God, I'm only putting up a small list of names that are known to human history, but there are many names that are not known to history, and that there are other names that, just for brevity and time, we can't list all the names. Like there's several names listed in the Quran that did not show up in my presentation tonight, but they're real messengers as well. And then there are other Baha'i scholars who are talking about other things that happen, like messengers of God to the indigenous people. Christopher Buck is a brilliant Baha'i scholar who has done work in this area. And I'm fascinated by his suggestion that the Iroquois teacher, Daganawida, might have been a manifestation. But this is all speculative. It's really fun to explore it, but it's hard to make definitive factual statements. But what is factual is that the Bab says that the messengers of God that have been sent to humanity are innumerable. So literally, whatever the moment was in human history, whether it was 1 million years ago or 2 million years ago, whenever that occurred, we have to logically assume that God was doing something by way of educating and elevating humanity, but we just don't know what it was. But I certainly would be eager to acknowledge that possibility. And if anybody ever comes up with archaeological evidence or some text from Baha'u'llah gets translated, I would be very eager and interested to learn more about it myself. But it's definitely something that happened in the past, but we just don't know a lot at all about it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess it was muted. Definitely the answers. The only thing I was saying that you have beautiful illustrations there. So maybe on your ruler that you have in the beginning. I mean, we know that even this agricultural revolution started 10,000 years ago. So 6,000 when you put there is not, sort of valid, and also maybe it does not do the justice for humanity's history. Of course, when you look at the Bible and the Old Testament, yes, you are right. But beyond that, so if we wanted to be a little bit more, on your illustration, you may put some question marks before that, at least.
I'm going to have to go back and check, because my recollection is that the 6,000 year period is mentioned in the writings explicitly, but I'm going to go look that up and see. I might be wrong.
Adamic cycle they're talking about.
Well, yeah, the Adamic cycle is 6,000 years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You have to come back, Edward. This is not enough. I would like to ask either Mrs. Ostani from Malaysia or Pina to say a prayer. I'm sorry, we have a dog here. Mrs. Ostani, great to see you.
This is Indonesian prayer for strength. Ya Tuhan, kami ini lemah, berilah kami kekuatan. Kami ini miskin, anugerahilah kami dengan kekayaan yang tak terbatas. Kami ini sakit, berilah kami kesembuhan keilahian-Mu. Kami ini tak berdaya, berilah kami kekuatan surgawi-Mu. Ya Tuhan, jadikanlah kami berguna di dunia ini. Bebaskanlah kami dari keadaan keakuan dan hawa nafsu. Ya Tuhan, jadikanlah kami teguh dalam cinta-Mu dan mungkinkanlah kami menyayangi seluruh umat manusia. Bantulah kami dalam pengabdian kepada dunia insani, agar kami dapat menjadi hamba dari hamba-hamba-Mu, agar kami dapat mencintai semua makhluk-Mu dan mengasihani seluruh umat-Mu. Ya Tuhan, Engkaulah Maha Perkasa, Engkaulah Maha Pengasih, Engkaulah Maha Pengampun, Engkaulah Maha Kuasa. Abdul Bahá.
Dear friends, thank you so very much. Nargis Khanum, we know this is too early in the morning in Malaysia. Thank you so much. Mr. Leo, thank you. Pina, would you like to say a prayer, please? Please
Okay.
go, please.
والله ای طالبی ملکوت به الطاف حضرت پروردگار امیدوار باش و از مصائبی شدید این جهان نامید مکن. الحمدلله خدای مهربان داره کتابی بهار بیمار است و کمکاری هر مبتلا پناهیت من است و معین بی کسان و به نهایت مهربان. اگر بدانی که قلب عبدالبها چقدر مهربان است البته از داد فرح و سرور پرواز نمایی و فریاد و تو با بیهوجی اسمان رسانه ولالای Baha'u'llah.
I should mention that Pina learned Persian. She's a Malay queen, and for some reason she decided to learn it, and she decided to chant in Persian. And Pina has a genius of a daughter, and we shared the same Ruhi class for a few sessions. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Thank you, really, really. We missed you all. We love you. Next Thursday, it's going to be another great session. Stay with us. And Edward, how can I thank you? It was wonderful. I really appreciate it.
I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
And you realize that,
great time.
Edward, I didn't ask any of my questions because the friends didn't let me do it.
Mhm.
So
Well,
maybe next time.
I hope so.
Does anyone want to say anything else?
Let me ask, would you like me to share my contact information screen one last time?
Absolutely.
Okay,
I
so let
want
me,
to say I love your film and I share it
Oh,
often
thank
with
you.
friends.
okay, so I'm quickly sharing my screen for anybody who wants to write down my contact information. I'll leave it up for a few seconds for people.
Thank you again. This was wonderful.
Thank you. I had a great time.
Who was that? Was that Leslie?
Yes, it was.
Leslie, how wonderful. Can we see your face, Leslie, because you're the sister?
I prefer not at this hour.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, Leslie. Okay.
All righty.
Thank you,
Well,
friends.
Have
Thank
a
you
wonderful
for being
evening.
with us.
Take care.
Thank you, Ed.
Good
Appreciate
night, Rod.
Ed,
Take care.
have you ever
night.
been to a wonderful fireside like this in your life?
This was pretty darn good. Thank you so much. I had a good time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
night,
Bye,
everyone.
Rod. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Nargis Khanum. Bye, Julie. Bye. Everyone. Bye, Mr. Liu.
Bye.
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 Okay, see you
Bye,
next week.
Gibby.
Nargis Khanum, do you have a family member called Nasreen Bastani
Yes.
from Indonesia?
Yes.
Well, you
Yeah,
know.
Nasreen Khanum is her sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
We met her when we went to Indonesia. That's
yes,
Yes.
She's there. She's still there, right? In Indonesia.
Yes.
good.
I'm sorry, friends. I gotta run, and if I go, everything will fall. So, anyways, much love. See you next Thursday. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Loving greetings from Malaysia. Bye.
Azizam, Nargis Khanum. Azizam. I love you. Pina.
You
Roya
more.
Jun, bye.
Thank you so much.
Farisha Khanum, bye.
Khanum
Thank you.
Aziz.
Azizam.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.